You have a negative and a positive. You have a positive and a negative. We only want to stay with one positive, one negative on one side. So we want to sew a loop around the negative first. So I'm going to take my needle, I'm going to go underneath, and I'm going to come up in the hole. I'm going to come up in the hole. I'm going to pull. My needle has a knot on it. My thread has a knot on the end. So it's going to come out, and then I'm going to go next to the hole. I'm not going in the hole, I'm going next to the hole. And I take my thread all the way through, and it put one loop around. I'm coming back up into the hole, and it takes a little bit to find it, but you can feel around. Okay, so I come in, inside the hole. My needle is inside. Come all the way back out, and I go outside the hole, near it but outside. So I made a second loop, and then I go inside the hole again, go pull it through, and I have, now you can decide if you want to start on the top or the bottom, and I'm outside the hole again. So as you can see, I have loops around. What I just did was made loops around the hole, around my negative. Now my thread ended underneath, so it's on the back side, which is fine. It doesn't matter if you end on the top or the bottom, but I'm going to come out. Now I'm getting ready to make a line to where my decoration is. So I go under, I go over a little, back through, pull it through, and I'm on the back side. I move it over a little, come through, pull it back, go over a little. And it doesn't matter where I put my decoration, I just have to keep a line to it. So let's say I'm going to have my decoration go right here. And on my decoration, I'm going to put my little light. If you do the lily light, I'm going to connect the negative end, and I'm going to make loops around the negative end. And if you look at the lights, you can see this side is the negative. This side is the positive. I want to connect the negative. Since I started with the negative here, I'm going to connect the negative. So if I use this one and my thread happens to be on the top, I'm just going to go through the hole, and I'm going to do loops just like I did before. I'm going to do about 3 loops, and I'm going to come up next to the hole. I'm going to come up next to the hole, but not inside the hole. And then I'm going to go through the hole. And I'm going to do this 3 times. 3 or 4, it's up to you. And I'm still on the negative side. So now let's say you use the LED light. You use one of these. So you know that the longer side is the positive and you want the negative. So let's just go ahead and bend our LED so that it's side by side. This is my negative side. So I'm going to sit this here, and I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to loop around this stem. So I'm going to come up. This one is a little bit easier. So I'm going to come up on this side. And I'm going to go closely next to it, and I'm going to put a thread over top. And I'm going to do this a couple of times the same way. I'm going to come up next to it, and go on the other side of it. So basically what I'm doing is I'm putting a stitch over top of this thread to hold the negative side in place. So if you look closely, I just have loops around that negative. And then since I am finished with my negative, I go ahead and I cut it and I tie a knot. Tie a knot at the end of my thread that's on my needle. And I like to do a double knot just to be sure that it doesn't come through when I sew next time. So double knot there, sit that to the side, and then I put a knot here. And I have a knot, and I can cut off the excess thread. Now that I have a knot, I can cut that piece off of excess, and I can have this piece off excess. And this is my negative. So I have a loop here going to the negative of my Lily light, going to the negative of my LED. Now I want to start all over and do the same thing again on the positive side. So I'm going to start under, come up inside the hole on the positive, pull my string. It's a knot at the end. Oh, well, that knot didn't work really great, so I'm going to pull my, go back through, come up on the inside, and since my knot didn't work, I'm going to be really careful not to pull that all the way through. Okay. And remember, I don't want my negative to touch my positive. And then I go next to it. Come next to it. And I made one loop. So now I want to come back up into the hole. Come up inside the hole. Pull that through and go outside of the hole. And I have two loops now. And again, I come inside the hole. Come up inside the hole. And then I go ahead and I start making my running stitch toward my positive. I want to make sure that I stay far, or I stay away from my negative thread line on the front and the back. I want to make sure I stay away. Now you can make these stitches neater if you want to. You can make them prettier. You can make them smaller, longer. It's up to you. But I'm drawing a line to my positive light, to the positive side. So remember, we have our positive here. So I go ahead, and since I ended on the bottom, I'm coming up through the middle, of my positive side. And I'm going to make about 3 loops. So now I go on the outside. And I made 1 loop. And then I come back on the inside. I put my needle back through the inside of the hole on the positive side. And I make another loop. And I go on the outside. I have 2 loops now. I come back to the inside. And sometimes it gets a little hard trying to find that hole from underneath, which is fine. There we go. I'm back on the inside of it, on the positive side. And I go through. Now I want to sew the positive side of my LED. I want to make loops around this leg on the positive side of my LED. So just out of preference, I'm going to go under here That way it looks neater on the top side. And then I'm just going to come up from the bottom here. And I'm going to put loops around the positive leg of the LED. There, so you can see I have one loop around it. So I come up over again. And I go over top of it because I'm making loops over top of that leg. Pull it through. So I have 2 stitches over the positive leg, 2 stitches over the positive leg, and I come back up on this side of it. Come on this side of it and go back over top. So now I have 3 stitches holding that positive leg down, and I am done with that. So what I have 1 string from the negative on my light on my battery holder going to the negative on my light and the negative on my LED leg. And then I ended that string. I cut it off, tied it off. And then I started on the positive side and I made a line through to the positive side of my lily light, and I looped it around the positive side of my LED. So now I can end this. I can cut this string. Tie a knot in it. To end, this is my negative stitch. Tie a knot, end that. I can cut off the excess so it doesn't accidentally touch my negative string. And then I have this excess on the positive string where we started. I can tie another knot in here because remember my first knot didn't take the first time. So I can just tie a knot there, cut this up, drop the scissors, cut this off and make sure that doesn't touch. So my negative line is separate and my positive line is separate. And I want to make sure they don't touch at all. So then I have my positive line going to the positive sides of my lights and the negative line going to the negative sides of my lights. And then I need to find my battery. So I'm going to pause. Then I take the battery, open up my battery holder. All right, so when I take the battery out of the pack, I have a positive side which has writing and the negative side which just has a little design. So I'm going to take my battery positive side up, make sure my switch is off, and here you can see the off and on the switch. I want to make sure my switch is off. I'm going to put my battery inside, positive side up. I'm going to push it all the way in. And then I'm going to turn my switch on. And if my connections are right and nothing is touching and everything is good, my light should light up. And there they are. And then I can turn it off. And then if I choose to add more decorations, I can add more decorations on to my bag and design it. Because I know that all of my stitches are working, nothing is touching. And let's say if I wanted to hide those stitches, I could even add my butterfly in between there, turn it on, and it still works. Okay.